In a village filled with laughter and the smell of roasting maize, life was peaceful but alive with energy. Children raced through the dusty paths, and the elders sat beneath the grand baobab tree, sharing stories about warriors and kings. The village's hunters prepared for the big hunt, sharpening their spears and testing their bows. But that year's hunt was no ordinary one. It was the season of the great antelope, a creature so swift and clever that few had ever captured it. Hunters from nearby villages came to try their luck. Among them was a stranger dressed plainly, his hood drawn low. No one recognized him as Prince Kwezi, heir to the throne. And then, there was Moyo. She was the village's finest hunter, though some called her the most stubborn. She laughed at danger and challenged anyone who doubted her skill. That morning, she was ready to prove herself once again, unaware that fate had something unexpected in store for her. The hunt began at dawn. Moyo moved silently through the dense forest, her bow ready and her sharp eyes scanning the ground for tracks. She had her mind set on the great antelope, determined to bring it back as her prize. Suddenly, she heard a rustle behind her. Turning quickly, she saw a figure crouched in the bushes. It was the stranger. "Are you following me?" she demanded, her voice low but firm. The man straightened up, brushing leaves off his tunic. "Not following. I'm just on the same trail." Moyo narrowed her eyes. "This isn't a game for tourists. Go back to where you came from." The man smirked. "I could say the same to you. This trail isn't marked as yours." Before Moyo could reply, a distant sound caught their attention, the thunderous hoofs of the great antelope. Without another word, both of them sprinted toward the noise. The hunt turned into a wild chase through the forest. The great antelope was as magnificent as the story said, its silver coat shining in the sunlight as it leapt through the trees. Moyo was fast, but the stranger surprised her. He kept up, his movements sure and quick. "Not bad for someone who doesn't belong here," Moyo muttered as they ran side by side. "I could say the same for you," he replied, grinning. They darted through thickets and leapt over streams, each trying to outpace the other. At one point, Moyo spotted a shortcut, a steep rocky incline. She climbed it with ease, but when she looked back, she saw the stranger struggling to keep his footing. "Need help, city boy?" she teased, extending a hand. He hesitated for a moment before grabbing it. "Don't think this means I owe you. Just try to keep up," she said with a smirk. Hours later, they cornered the great antelope near a cliff overlooking the valley. It stood tall and defiant, its silver coat gleaming in the fading sunlight. Moyo raised her bow, ready to take the shot, but so did the stranger. "You can't both take it," I called from the trees, watching the scene unfold. They glanced at each other, their stubborn pride clashing in the silence. Finally, Moyo lowered her bow. "Fine," she said. "Let's see what you've got, city boy." The man took his shot and missed. The arrow flew wide, and the great antelope bolted. Moyo burst out laughing. "Nice try," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Now watch how it's done." With one smooth motion, she drew her bow and released an arrow. It struck true, and the great antelope fell. The stranger stared at her, a mix of admiration and frustration on his face. "You're impressive." "And you're hopeless," Moyo replied, slinging the antelope over her shoulder. "Next time, stay out of my way." But as she walked away, something about him lingered in her mind. When they returned to the village, the hunters gathered to celebrate Moyo's victory. The stranger stood in the crowd, quietly observing. Then, the village chief approached him. "Your Highness," he said, bowing low. Moyo froze. "Your Highness." The man pulled back his hood, revealing his royal insignia. "I'm Prince Kwezi," he said simply. "And you're the best hunter I've ever met." Moyo's jaw tightened. You tricked me. I never lied, Kwezi replied, his tone calm. You just assumed. The crowd murmured in awe, but Moyo wasn't impressed. A prince who can't hunt. Pathetic. Kwezi chuckled. A hunter who thinks she's better than a prince. Interesting. And just like that, their rivalry and their connection was born. Over the next weeks, Kwezi stayed in the village, determined to learn from Moyo. She taught him how to track animals, how to move silently through the forest, and how to survive in the wild. He frustrated her with his mistakes, but he also surprised her with his determination. One evening, after a long day of hunting, Kwezi said, "You know, you're the first person who's ever treated me like a normal man." Moyo shrugged. Maybe because I don't care about titles. I care about what people can do. He smiled. And what do you think I can do? She looked at him thoughtfully. You can try harder. They laughed, but beneath their banter, something deeper was growing. It wasn't just rivalry anymore. It was respect, and maybe something more. Their journey was far from over, but one thing was clear: together, they were unstoppable. At first, Moyo treated him like any other overconfident outsider. You'll get tired of this village soon, she said one day as they sat near the river, her hands busy weaving a trap for fish. Maybe, Kwezi replied, sitting cross-legged beside her. But I like a challenge. And you, Moyo, are the biggest challenge of all. She rolled her eyes. You think flattery will work on me? It's not flattery if it's true, he said, grinning. Despite her teasing, Moyo found herself warming to Kwezi. He wasn't like the other men she knew. He wasn't intimidated by her independence or her sharp tongue. Instead, he seemed drawn to it. One evening, during a village celebration, Kwezi decided to make his feelings known. The villagers were gathered around a massive fire, dancing and singing. Moyo, true to herself, wasn't in the middle of the dance circle. Instead, she leaned against a tree, observing the festivities with a small smile. Kwezi approached her, carrying 2 cups of palm wine. Not dancing, he asked, handing her one. Not my thing, she replied, taking a sip. Well, lucky for me, that means I get you all to myself. She raised an eyebrow. You're bold for someone who still can't string a bow properly. He laughed, then turned serious. Moyo, I've never met anyone like you. You're strong, fearless, and you speak your mind. You make me want to be better. She stared at him, her usual sharp words failing her for once. Kwezi, you don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, he insisted. I admire you. I care about you. For a moment, Moyo let her guard down. You're a prince, Kwezi. Your world is full of rules and expectations. I don't belong there. Then I'll change the rules, he said without hesitation. Their blossoming romance didn't go unnoticed. Word reached the palace, and soon Kwezi's parents summoned him back. The village is no place for a prince, the king declared. And that girl, she's unsuitable. She's everything I could want, Kwezi argued. She's wild and unrefined, the queen said coldly. A queen must bring dignity to the throne, not scandal. Meanwhile, Moyo faced pressure from her own family. Do you really think a prince would give up his life for you? Her father asked one evening. You're setting yourself up for heartbreak. I didn't ask him to fall for me, Moyo snapped. And I won't change who I am for anyone. Despite the obstacles, Kwezi refused to give up. Before leaving for the palace, Kwezi sought out Moyo one last time. He found her by the river, sharpening her arrows. Moyo, he said, his voice softer than usual. I have to go back for now, but I want you to know I'm not giving up on us. She looked at him, her expression guarded. Your family won't accept me. They will, he insisted. I'll make them see what I see in you. And if they don't? Then I'll choose you, he said firmly. Every time. Moyo's heart ached at his words, but she knew the reality of their situation. Don't make promises you can't keep, Kwezi. I mean every word, he said, taking her hand. You're worth fighting for, Moyo. When Kwezi left, the village felt quieter. Moyo pretended not to care, throwing herself into her haunts and daily tasks. But anyone who knew her well could see she missed him. At the palace, Kwezi argued with his parents, trying to convince them of Moyo's worth. But their disapproval only grew. They insisted he marry a noblewoman from a neighboring kingdom to secure an alliance. The pressure wore on both of them. Letters were sent between the palace and the village, but they grew less frequent over time. Moyo, ever proud and independent, began to wonder if she was holding Kwezi back. When Kwezi finally returned to the village weeks later, he looked worn and frustrated. I told my parents I won't marry anyone but you, he said as they walked through the forest. And what did they say? Moyo asked, though she already knew the answer. They are furious, Kwezi admitted. But I don't care. I'll leave the palace if I have to. Moyo stopped walking, turning to face him. You'd give up everything. Your family, your kingdom, for me. Yes, he said without hesitation. She shook her head. You don't understand what you're saying, Kwezi. I don't want you to resent me later. You belong in the palace, leading your people. I belong here, in the wild. You belong with me, he insisted, his voice breaking. Tears filled Moyo's eyes, though she refused to let them fall. Maybe love isn't enough, she whispered. And with that, she walked away, leaving Kwezi standing alone in the forest.